Hello everyone and welcome to this special weekday Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising, with Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters across the franchised and independent dealer sectors.
Hello and welcome to this Motor Trade Radio weekday podcast interview. Today we're joined by Perran Moon. Perran's been in the automotive sector for over 2 decades and will be a familiar name to many listeners from his days as Group Marketing Director at Manheim and B2B Marketing Director of Autotrader. More recently, he was the Chief Marketing Officer at Believ, the EV charging network. And since the 4th of July, Perran has been the Labour Member of Parliament for Camborne, Redruth and Hale in Cornwall. So welcome to the podcast, Perran Moon MP. Has it sunk in for you yet?
Not really. We've had a pretty whirlwind July, and thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
I listen to the podcast, so I'd recommend anyone in the automotive industry to listen to it. We got elected on the 4th of July, which was a Thursday. On the Sunday, I was on the train from Cornwall up to London, and have had about 3 or 4 days back in Cornwall since then. So it's really been a very, very busy July because we've been trying to get as much through Parliament as possible before recess, where the House of Commons arises, which happened on Tuesday, which, by the way, is not holiday. It's just
just make that clear. It's not a 6-week summer holiday.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you on, Perran, and you and I go back a long way. You know, as I mentioned during the introduction, certainly from your Manheim and Autotrader days. So, great opportunity to catch up with you because you're not leaving the automotive sector behind, because it's still very much part of who you are, and hopefully we can cover that over the course of this chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really keen to raise the profile of the automotive industry within government and to make sure that government is aware of the challenges and opportunities of the automotive industry over the next decade, really. And it will be a period of extreme change, as it has done, over several decades, actually. I'm really keen to act as at least one voice in government.
I mean, we shouldn't have waited till you become an MP before we got you on the podcast, to be fair, but we'll keep quiet on that one, I think, Perran. But, as mentioned, you've had a long career in automotive. And I suppose the big question for us and the listeners is, what prompted you to get into politics and inevitably stand to be an MP?
Well, the key driver for me initially was nothing to do with my career. It was actually it was a personal issue which I've spoken about publicly before, where my daughter became very ill with a mental health illness with anorexia about 10 years ago, and she became really very ill. And the only way that we could get support for her was if she reached the point where she was so ill. Critically ill, that she was then eligible for support through the Child and Adult Mental Health Service. And at that time, I thought, this is just a broken system. I've got a great career. I'm successful, but actually, this is just wrong. And I'm not just prepared to write a stiff letter to a faceless organisation. I want to try and do something about it. So I became a counsellor, where I applied and went through various different processes and that sort of thing. And I became a counsellor. And then the opportunity came up to stand in the only constituency in which I would ever serve as an MP, which is where I was born and grew up, in Camborne, Redruth and Hale. And I jumped at it because we've got the chance to transform mental health services for not just children, but for adults as well. Something that I don't think we talk about enough. We've had our own tragedies in the automotive industry, including, good friend of mine, James Davis, who was at Manheim a few years back. And we don't talk about it, particularly, it's not exclusively an issue for men, but particularly men don't talk about their mental health in the same way that they should. And I think we've got an opportunity to really transform that conversation over the course of the next decade within, obviously, and you'll hear this as a theme, within the financial constraints that we've inherited.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, and God bless JD, and hope your daughter is getting the care and support.
Yeah, look, she's really well, and I've spoken to her. She's really keen that, I do speak publicly about her, but she's really, really well. She's recovered fantastically, and she's a bright young thing with a happy life. So she's good, but not everybody is as fortunate as she was.
Fantastic. And just thinking about your background and interesting, that you have come from that industrial, that automotive background. Did anything, in this short period of time, obviously being an MP and the build up to it, did anything prepare you? Did it help prepare you for what you're now facing and what you've been involved with?
I think that the positions that I was working in, where I was having to manage lots and lots of different functions and make decisions quite quickly, read through a lot of paperwork, that all helps, obviously, because it's the volume of work and that you can realistically get through, and having to organize yourself in a certain way to be sorting through the kind of wheat from the chaff and making sure that you're focusing on those big decisions. That all helped. And so in terms of where we are in the automotive industry as well, that was a driver for me, because obviously I've moved from manufacturers to retailers. I worked for Auto Trader, I worked for a bit, and then kind of started working a little bit for ZapMap, and got a real interest on the EV side, and the transition to a greener economy, and that was obviously very relevant to kind of where we are now as a government. That's the direction of travel that we will be pursuing.
And Perran, you've just completed, if you can believe this, your first month as an MP. Tell us about how that has gone and what observations you have, certainly about the onboarding process and some of the lifestyle changes that it's all involved.
Well, for me personally, in terms of timing of the kind of typical week, it wasn't too bad, because I was working 3 days a week in the office in London at Believ, and then would have Monday and Friday working from home. So that hasn't fundamentally changed, because we're expected to be in Westminster Monday evening, and then through to Thursday evening, and then come home. So there wasn't too much of a change. Clearly, the Westminster Palace is basically a complete replica of Hogwarts. Other than the staircases moving, it's just a complete labyrinth of tunnels and staircases and different coloured carpets, and you find yourself just walking for ages, and then, well, I'm getting completely lost. Actually, it is getting better and better, and you find these fixed routes, and you stay on that route, or you step off it and you'll get lost. So there's a lot of learning to do in terms of place, in terms of understanding how to quickly to get from A to B. But in terms of the pure onboarding, there was a really substantive training and onboarding process that has run in parallel with all of this work, which is why July has been so busy at the minute.
Yeah.
Because we've been running the training course for a record number of new MPs in Parliament, over 300 new MPs in Parliament, alongside the desire for the government to get through the King's Speech and get as much through as we possibly can before recess at the end of July. So that's why it's been really, really busy. But the onboarding process includes, all of the processes and procedures, and the types of question you can ask and when you can ask them, and who you contact to get particular issues resolved for constituents, the different all-party parliamentary groups, the different select committee groups, recruiting staff, because MPs need staff, and because there's suddenly 300 MPs, that's a lot of staff, because generally MPs have a team of 4 or 5 people split between the constituency and London. That recruiting process is we're all recruiting like mad. So it's been a very, very intense month. Frankly, I'm quite glad to be home, back in Cornwall for the month. But now I've got to set up my constituency office. I've got to recruit here, and I'm literally going to be leaving this interview and going straight to a graduation ceremony, and lots of other kind of demands on the time for the MP to turn up to, which I'm not complaining about at all. It's exactly what I expected. But it's really important that people see their MP and have access to their MP, and feel that their MP is listening to what they're saying and trying to help them in any ways that they can.
I mean, it just seems not dissimilar to probably the day job then previously in automotive, maybe in many ways, but slightly different. I mean, just thinking about, I mean, you're talking through there the short period of time and how quickly you're moving, but I know that when we initially got in contact, you'd already asked your first question in the house, but from chatting pre-recording, you've actually asked further questions within the house, and I know the first one will resonate with listeners of today's podcast, because it's it's talking about the bureaucracy around the barriers and the rollout of EV charging network. I mean, do you want to talk through, obviously, how this connects with what you did previously as your role at Believ and the questions that you've been raising already within the house?
Yeah, I think within Westminster, there's a requirement to really understand a little bit more about the challenges we have with more broadly within the automotive industry, but specifically from my perspective within the EV charging industry, because as I see it, based on my experience, there are some bureaucratic hurdles that we've put in place that are limiting the speed and scale with which we can roll out EV charging, public access EV charging infrastructure, and the way that local authorities are being pushed down a particular route to be able to access the charging they need on the ground, I don't think is as good as it could be. And I'm really keen to talk to the powers that be about that, and to clear some of the hurdles and some of the barriers, so that we can get EV. If you build it, they will come. If we don't have EV infrastructure, a comprehensive national network of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, the right speeds in the right car parks at the right streets, people will not transition to EVs as quickly as we would like them to. And it is a barrier, and it is a question that we have to get the network in place. Yes, there'll be people who are able to have an EV charger, a home charging EV charge point, which is absolutely fine. But we have to have the national public access network, and it's not moving fast enough at the moment.
Obviously, this debate has already been, in the House and on that subject. And how did it go? I mean, do you feel that it's moving forward? People are listening to the challenges?
Well, Philip, it's very early days at the minute, and we as I say, we've had 1,000,001 other things to do. I'm hopeful that when I get back in September, I will be able to sit down with ministers and talk, just share my experience, frankly, of what is happening on the ground, and encourage them to go and speak to other people in the sector, and just, I'm just one voice, but to make sure that they're getting a holistic view of why it is taking so long for local authorities to go to market, to identify the resources they need, and to get EV charging installed on street and in car parks. Because, as I say, it's not moving fast enough at the moment. There are hurdles that I think that local authorities have to jump through, which are unnecessary. There is a lack of resource, because it's a relatively new industry, and you're asking local authorities to administer a process that they've never had to administer before. Inevitably, when you mention, and I was a councillor myself, like you, Philip, when you mention infrastructure to a local authority, they instantly think of public access, public funding, and in the scenario of EV infrastructure, the bottom line is you don't need public funding to install the charge point networks that we need in the UK. There is private capital out there, ready, willing, and able to move this forward. And we're not releasing that. We're not making it easy for local authorities to work with the private sector to get the EV infrastructure that we need so that their residents can transition as quickly as possible away from petrol and diesel vehicles. We're making it more difficult. And I want to be part of the conversation that at least looks at why it is so difficult and clears some of those barriers so that we can just get on with it.
And Perran, following on from that, when you announced on LinkedIn that you'd become an MP, we kind of half jokingly said on the podcast how good it was to finally have someone in Parliament who understood the automotive sector. Now, I hear what you're saying about EVs and the role that you can play in bringing the charging network onto sort of more agendas for discussion within Parliament. Is there anything else in your automotive experience you think you can bring to bear in terms of maybe car retailers and getting their voice heard?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, dealer profitability is something that we have to take seriously in government. We have to make sure that we are focused on ensuring that the industry employs hundreds of thousands of people, right? So politicians should be right across this industry. It's an absolutely core driver. So we need to be working with the industry to make sure that as we transition away from petrol and diesel vehicles, we're ensuring that our retail industries have all of the tools that they need and the support that they need to ensure that transition is as smooth as possible through to the point where they've got sustainable, viable, profitable businesses, and they're employing more people. The industry is pretty robust. I can remember we came through. Was it 2009 and said that I can't remember half of franchise dealers were gonna fold because of the global financial crisis, and they didn't. We had the scrappage scheme, which helped. We had dealers that evolved and adapted their business models, focused in other more profitable areas. Same thing happened during COVID. We had the adaptation of retailers and making sure that they were adapting their businesses and evolving their businesses. The automotive industry, in my view, we should be very proud of it. We should be screaming and shouting about it. It is an evolving beast. It rolls with the punches, but what it wants, as far as I can see, is long-term stability. We need to make sure that interest rates are coming down. We've got to grow the economy. Frankly, whatever anyone says, unless we are growing the economy, we're not going to be able to invest in the public services that we need, and that includes transport as well. So we have to make sure those conditions are right. And what, as far as I'm concerned, retailers desperately need is long-term security, not flip-flopping from policy to policy. We need some long-term decisions made, stick to those decisions, and then work with the industry to make sure that we're able to support them to get to this new transition, which will be inevitably over the course of the next 10 years, away from 10, 15 years probably, by the time we're looking at serious numbers in the second-hand market, away from petrol and diesel vehicles.
I mean, it's great to hear you. You've got that knowledge of the sector, the challenges in the sector, and I think what's clear is your industry knowledge, which is clearly a lot of the new MPs I'm reported have got industry knowledge, which is fairly unique in this. It's bringing this into Parliament now. So I think one thing that has been, it was lightly touched on the manifesto. The reports are that it's going to be confirmed that the reversing and going back to the original 2030 deadline target for the ban of ICE cars. I believe LCVs is still yet to be confirmed or announced. But what's your view on that in terms of your previous experience from both the consumers and the dealer sector? And probably as a quick follow-up to that, Have you met Louise Haigh yet, the new Transport Secretary? And are there other pressing issues that you're trying to liaise and work on with the Transport Secretary for the industry?
So I met Lou Haigh a couple of times over the course of the last couple of years, and I haven't had a proper sit down with her yet since the election. I very much want to, and keen to set that up. I'll be completely straight with you, Philip. I'm very, very much in favour of bringing the 2030 target back. We have to. This is why I'm very focused on public access EV charging, because it's going to be very problematic if we don't have a national network of public access EV charging, which is why we need to get on with that now. And we need to work with the industry to make sure that in areas such as supply, we are able to ensure that this is why I was talking about dealer profitability and sustainability. But in my limited understanding of where the manufacturers were, and this is why the long-term planning is really important, because manufacturers, if they know what the requirements are in a particular country, then they can adapt to ensure that they're there. And I know other countries have pushed back to 2035 for the ban on new petrol and diesel vehicles. I've always been in favour of a 2030. I think it was a mistake, and I think it actually sent out all the wrong messages around EV infrastructure because the last government pushed it back to 2035. And I'm really pleased that in our manifesto we said that we're going to bring it forward again to 2030. But that comes with in my view, that becomes with a responsibility of government to understand what the implications of that 2030 ban are, and from those implications to support the industry to make sure that we can coherently deliver it.
And finally, Perran, as you mentioned, the summer recess has just started, which you made clear is not a holiday, even though where you are, you're spoilt for choice when it comes to beaches on two coastlines. What's going to be keeping you busy over the coming weeks and months?
So yeah, I'm glad you brought up the place that I live, Curtis, because I do believe that you also spent a few formative years in
I
my
did
hometown
indeed,
of
yeah.
Bruges. Yeah, so you'll know it. Look, I'm very lucky to live in a stunning part of the country, but you have to remember that whilst most people, when they think of Cornwall, think of pasties and beaches and ice cream, Cornwall's the fourth most deprived region of Northern Europe, and my constituency of Campbell, Redruth and Hale is the most deprived constituency in Cornwall. So we've got massive levels of deprivation. Lots of people really wanting to talk to me and support them with issues of housing and affordability and homelessness and mental health, and a whole gamut of issues. My inbox, because I've been so busy in July, up country, up the line. I'm going to be very, very focused in August at answering all of the queries that people have sent me. I'm doing surgeries every weekend across the constituency. Lots of people contact me on social media, and then combined with that, there are lots of kind of responsibilities to attend civic functions. As I say, I'm just off to a graduation ceremony at our university in Penryn, which is in the constituency, and then there's all sorts of administrative things to focus on, like getting my office up and running and recruiting staff, and ensuring that they're up to speed with all the systems and trained, so that we can really start having a coherent program. So it is, yes, I'm in Cornwall for the whole of August, and it sounds like heaven, but I can assure you I will probably get, if I'm lucky, 4 days split, 2 days each, two in the middle of in the middle of August and 2 at the end of August. Other than that, I will be working all the way through, and then we're back in Westminster on the 2nd of September.
Well, I do sincerely hope that on those couple of days that you are taking off, the sun is shining and you're able to get to the beach.
Thanks very much, Curtis.
Clearly, Perran, it's fantastic. When we heard the news and myself, Curtis, and other people we know across, it's fantastic news. I think, from what you're talking about, that knowledge and everything else, and I think you're going to be busy. I think just generally on the subjects that you wanted to raise and involve with, you're going to be busy for definite. So, fantastic, and we wish you all the best with it. And hopefully we'll get you back on at some point in the future as well, and you can give us a little bit more of things that have changed, things that you've been involved with, and how you are trying to make a difference both in central government and in your local communities. So huge thank you for coming on, and massive thank you for sharing your insight and knowledge within this very short period of time within government there.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, Philip and Curtis. And if any of your listeners want to email me and ask me any questions at all, I will try and get answers for them. But really happy to come back on in a few months' time and talk about progress we've made.
Well, many thanks, Perran. Unfortunately, that's all for now. We hope you've enjoyed this weekday special. Many thanks once again to Perran for joining us for today's podcast. We're back with the headlines on Saturday. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to this special weekday Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. Philip and Curtis will be back with the week's big motor retailing headlines on Saturday. Live, on demand, wherever you are, on your podcast feed.